organizer. I didn't know I could do it also in Croatian language, so I was thinking that the Serbian is exclusive, but next time I will be much more easier for me. Still, the presentation is in English, but all the questions are warmly welcome in any of the languages which you might use. So, in European Union, we are facing recently, not only European Union, but mostly in European Union, a lot of discussions about refrigerants, about the positioning of refrigerants. What is the good thing? We could have heard from Professor Čurko that we are inclining to go to so-called natural refrigerants, but there are also still hydrocarbons, fluorinated hydrocarbons, so HFCs. The biggest worry of today's industry is how to maintain sustainable use of the machines we still already have in use. Because it's illusionary to think that we can replace everything in 5 or 10 years, which we have until 2030, where the F-gas regulation is going on. So basically what a small group of people, including me, we were thinking how to really do some improvements on this recycling process, because actually having the information from European Commissions and ERA that 2017 we didn't have even 4 or 5% of the total recycled refrigerants on the market, then we can only imagine what happens with the rest. I don't want to accuse anybody, but talking to a lot of installers, especially in our region, we are witnesses of not so legal and common practice. So we came to an idea how to maybe give a contribution to the recycling of the HFCs. So basically I would like to tell you a little bit of the circular market, so how the refrigerants are behaving on the market, and the next is recovery market. It's maybe ambitious to call it recovery market, but it's the problems and challenges which we face with the recovery phase. And of course this 3R, triple R, we don't have still official name because we are in a very beginning initial phase of the project. So circular market of refrigerants, actually we start from the machine which has the refrigerant. So this machine has to get the refrigerant from some production, so refrigerant has to be produced, we put it in the machine, then during the installation, servicing of the refrigerant is kind of a life cycle of the refrigerant, and then we come to a phase where the equipment is at the end of the life cycle. So the question is, what do we do with this refrigerant? So it used to be this end of life, so cradle to grave, which is not popular anymore. Those refrigerants were incinerated, those refrigerants were burned at the end, or disappearing somewhere in the process. But if you look at this smaller circle, what we'd like to focus on, and this is the circle where we actually reuse the refrigerants. We have really these resources which we already have, how to reuse them. So basically, we introduced in our, let's say, philosophy that we have to reuse it, we have to recycle. Don't get this recycle only as a recycle, could be reclaiming of the refrigerant actually, but this is kind of a process where we get back the refrigerant into the regular use in the machines, which have need for the refrigerants, instead of using new resources, new virgin refrigerants. Basically, it always remains the situation that we will have to properly dispose the refrigerant. Means that we have to incinerate it at the end, but this is part of the process and we have a full control of the whole process. Why, and I will be coming back to this why, market of refrigerants, we are facing very tight market of refrigerants in terms of HFCs. Don't mind me calling it this refrigerants, I'm really referring to HFCs only, because the market we know, it's under the F-gas regulation, so every 3 years we have a kind of a 30% reduction based on CO2 equivalents. And next thing is that we can see that the lack of faith that there will be refrigerants also in the future available on the market. So I will come to I'm starting with the recovery market. Actually, in E-norm EN 378, chapter 4, we have, chapter 4, the fourth part, we have kind of a simple flow, what happens with the refrigerant. So we take it from the machine, so we recover it from the machine, we can reuse it, which is very rare, although it's used very often, but shouldn't be so. We can recycle it, then reuse it again, or we can reclaim it and use it again. Of course, this is always a part, if the refrigerant is contaminated, we have to get rid of it, but in a proper way, we have to dispose it, or that's incinerating it. This is kind of a map of the recovery, again, ambitiously called market, but this is what happens with pictures in it. So basically, after getting the refrigerant to a cylinder, in order to manipulate with it in European Union, actually we have to know what we have. So this refrigerant has to be tested. We have to analyze the content, what it is. So after analyzing, we know what it is. So we can either recycle it, which is the flow down. We can recycle it and reuse it again after achieving a certain cleanness and standard of the refrigerant. Or we can go to the, in case of it's not suitable for recycling, we then go in the way of reclaiming and then putting again into the process. Of course, incineration is part of it. What we did, we tried to also segment the refrigerants we have, how to call it differently. So we said for the refrigerants which we can recycle, which is actually the basic process of removing oil, moisture, particles. So this kind of, we call it A-line or A-level refrigerant. It's suitable for recycling. With good machine even, we can achieve AHRI 700 requirements. So actually it's almost with, of course we have to test it, we have to certify it, but this is then the refrigerant which has the same value as the virgin, as the normal one, new one. Or we put it to the reclaiming. If it's suitable for the reclaiming, then we call it B-line or B-level. If it's then the C-level, we call it C-level. The C-level refrigerant actually has to be incinerated, or we can do a thermal conversion, which means we can use the components of the refrigerant, but not to put it back into refrigerants. So it could be used, for example, I don't know, chlor can be used for different purposes, or fluor, but not for refrigerants. About the challenges of the recovery markets, I have used another picture, but the first challenge actually what we are facing is checking the quality. What do we actually have? So the checking equipment is extremely expensive. The equipment which we also have at the disposal for quality checking is, believe it or not, on very, very low level technically. That also shows that it's not being used really in any process. So this is the challenge, how to make sure that we accept, that we really get an acceptance of the quality of what do we recover from the machine. The second key challenge is actually then to transport it in European Union. Recover the refrigerant from the machine in not few countries, so many countries in European Union, is considered a hazardous waste for some reason. I can understand if we say this is going to be disposed, then it's a waste, but if you're using it, it's not a waste anymore. So this is the technicality in discussion with the European Commission. We got ensured us that if we are proceeding correctly with the projects, that they will support us also in changing the regulation, whatever it means. But we also have a kind of a positive feedback from some ministries in European Union that they are ready to listen to the arguments which we have connected to the project. Good. Then this is kind of an introduction. The project itself. So we call it the 3R, triple R project. This is a simple idea, which is which came out of the necessity, out of the really worries we had. we realized that the refrigerant distributors do not care about the recycling. They are mostly interested in selling new refrigerant. This is the money. This is actually the easiest way. Not considered, so the used refrigerant is not considered as an asset. We try to make it sustainable also to cover the need of the refrigerant, for the refrigerant in the future. Is there any sustainable way? And we really try to find out who should be responsible for the whole process and discussing. So I started with it like 1 year ago. And believe me, with whichever stakeholder we talked, none of the stakeholders were interested in taking the responsibility for that. So that's one of the reasons we started in our company. Also, the flow of the refrigerant, information about the refrigerant is insufficient on the market. We have no clue what happens with 95% of the refrigerant in use. Of course, we try to make it interesting then for the stakeholders, so to make a refrigerant an asset. So it would have a value, not a waste as is usually represented. Of course, the legal part could be maybe interesting for the lawmakers to accept this and to support us in this way, because the track of the refrigerant should be much closer and much more precise. The guiding light, so the guiding is actually all existing refrigerants should be recovered, not vented into the air, not disappearing in the process, but all refrigerants should be evacuated or recovered. And the second one, by developing this certification of the quality process, I think we can support also the market in upcoming 2021, where we will be facing new F-gas reduction of around 30% minus in use of HFCs. So basically the platform is about, it's a trading platform, it's very simple ones, and in some jokes we call it eBay for the refrigerants. So this is the platform where the buyer and seller should meet. Those are the players in this platform. Of course, manufacturer of the equipment may have the interest. I don't think in the beginning we'll be having a bigger one. Then the second one, establishing this quality insurance process, the process which will check the quality of the refrigerant before it comes into the trade. This is very important part, and still, even the project is started, we didn't solve this one effectively because we still didn't find the equipment on the world market, a suitable equipment for that. So the next thing is really forming a quality database about who is dealing with the refrigerants, and here is the very key thing. This is the F-gas certification, and the companies, people who will not, which will not be certified or not certified, will not have an access to this platform. So this is actually a trading platform which company I work for, Daikin, is not, we just facilitate, we do not buy, we do not sell, we are not the player. We try to be as impartial as possible, so objective. It's actually the initiative which is not very profitable. For now, we don't have it solved in terms of financing, but we have a full support from Japanese top management that we have to go, because this is kind of responsibility we have towards the market, because we are usually blamed as the industry which is still using HFCs, not very popular. A sneak peek to how should it look like. So this is actually like a stock market. You can see that we have this kind of a statuses of refrigerants, where it is at the moment. So this is a stock of the refrigerant, which is in, let's say, in a cellar, usually an installer. But I forgot to mention why this is interesting, why this could be interesting, because it should cover the smallest amounts of refrigerant. Because now, okay, if you have 2 tons of refrigerant, every company will take it. But if you have 50 kilos of refrigerant, actually you have no clue what to do with it. And even you have to pay for the incineration. So that's why this would be interesting. So the information about the refrigerant, what do we have, how much of the refrigerant, and we are based on the bidding of the prices. So the refrigerant owner, so the seller, gets the offer from the refrigerant buyer for the refrigerant. This part is very private and is happening between two parties. But both parties have an overview of the market, and yeah, the relationship is always between two parties, but the overview of the market is available to all participants. So again, the participant on that should and must have F-gas certificate. So basically, by encouraging reclaiming or recycling, why this, actually again, why do we do it? But we need to act really, really now. It's a sustainable way to keep the existing equipment running. Because as the European Union has in mind reduction of the HFCs, I'm glad that Hrvoje used this phase down, because we are usually faced with the expression phased out. HFCs will not be phased out, not yet. Only the ones with the bigger and global warming potential. So this is actually the sustainable thinking to keep the existing equipment running and to keep really the industry taking care of the refrigerant. Because what we have here is a potential of the global warming. Because if no refrigerant leaks, there is no global warming potential. And this is basically the thing we want to really work on. We can do a lot on this level. So environmental protection is also the very important part. This is a good also, if you go for a company like mine, it's really a good thing that we can also show that we care, because by saying you care, it means nothing, but when you show that you really care, then it's something is happening. Of course, thinking of Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia, or countries in a surrounding, maybe it's not interesting today, but I believe by introducing Kigali Amendment, this will become very, very interesting, and we do not talk about the distant future. So by preparing also the market for that now can be extremely interesting. Yeah, the benefits, one of the very, very important benefits is volumes and prices, the market which is there and is making the asset out of the refrigerant. And basically, we started 2019, and the rollout, we hope for the 1st of January 2021, so the next year will be extremely difficult and challenging to put it forward, but we are determined to do so. I would like to thank early supporters, and I would like to mention them really, because this was in terms of faith that we are doing a good thing. This is the Hungarian Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Association, Croatian Green Building Council, Croatian Air Conditioning and Heat Pump Association, HURGT, thank you Professor Čurkom for the support. The other manufacturers, because we had a competitor on board who didn't waste time to really support the action. Chemical producer, or this is us, in a way, and then research institutes from Italy and the research center also in Italy. Thank you very much for your attention.